Oftentimes when reading webpack source code, I encountered this notion of runtime. And in this video I would like to attempt to explain this concept. And the reason I'm saying that I will try to explain it is that at this point I don't feel I fully understand it, because I find that it's not that easy to put the explanation into words, but nevertheless I will try to do that. So, runtime. My first thought when I hear runtime, it makes me think of bundled files, because as you know, webpack will be given an app through entry points, and webpack will do its job to bundle the files together to do any sort of optimizations and so on. And what we get is a bundle, or let's call them bundled files. And when I think of those files, or when I think of runtime, I think this notion suits those bundled files. So the bundling process could be thought of as compile time, and when we load, for example, a bundled application into a browser, then that would be the context of runtime, or a runtime context. So at this point we can say that a first idea, or a first way to describe this runtime concept is that it is relevant on or for bundled files. Next, I have prepared a small example. This is a fictive module graph, but it looks like this. So we have two entries, and by entry I mean an entry object such as this. So each entry object will be annotated with this arrow that has an entry on it, and basically this would be an entry file to a project or to any app for webpack. So in this case we have two. Then we have a couple of imports. This import arrow is a simple import, an import statement. Then this import function is simply the import function, which in webpack will create a new chunk. And this is very important to understand, because as we will see, this concept of runtime, this runtime concept is also relevant when you talk about chunks. Chunks, which are essentially the bundled files. So when we refer to the bundled files, we can refer to them as chunks. And yeah, as we see, we have a couple of imports, a couple of normal imports, as well as some import functions. This is just a starting point, because as I've talked in previous videos, from this module graph, webpack will create a chunk graph, which in this case looks like this. I will bring this a bit above. Okay, so we have a module graph, we have the concept that we try to explain, and the chunk graph. So from this module graph, this chunk graph will result. And as we'll see, we have two different branches, one for each entry. And here I want to highlight another important aspect of the concept of runtime, which is that each entry can define a runtime, or in other words, runtimes, or let's say that runtimes are defined by entries. So we can say that runtimes are defined by entries, which are essentially items from this entry object that you see here. Okay, so with this in mind, with this concept in mind, let's first examine the chunk graph very quickly. So we have this entry chunk, which is the chunk, which is an entry chunk in this case, because it will be the door to our application when we, for example, load it into the browser. And this entry chunk will contain these modules. It will contain entry 1, which is the entry module, A1 because it is a simple import between entry 1 and A.js, as well as A2 because there is a simple import between A and A2.js. Then we have chunk 2, which exists due to this import, and this chunk 2 will contain A1 as well as A3, again because there is a simple import between these two modules, and this A1 is essentially an entry module for another chunk. And then lastly we have chunk 3, which will only contain A4, again because we have used import function, and that function will create a new chunk. And then for this branch here we have the entry 2 chunk, which is this one, as well as another chunk B because we have used the import function. So let's quickly recap. The runtime, which is essentially a concept in Webpack, is relevant when you talk about bundle files or chunks, because we have agreed that bundle files essentially what is in the dist directory. So those files, all of these files can be called chunks. So the runtime concept is relevant for chunks or for bundled files. Runtimes can be defined by entries, and those are properties of the entry object. And lastly, I would say that the best way I can describe this concept based on these two previous concepts or notions is that essentially runtime is the context in which chunks will run. So in this case, this entire branches or this entire branch of chunks, it will run in the entry 1 runtime, and the name of this runtime is usually by default taken from the name of the entry module, if you don't provide any other name, because you can also do that in Webpack. And as you might guess, this the runtime this branch of chunks will run in is, in this case, as you see here, it will be entry 2. So I hope things are a bit more clear. For me, I would say it is, because I've just tried to explain something that seemed a bit harder in the beginning. Now I feel like I've got a better understanding even by trying to explain it. One last question that I think I will address in a different video is that, can a chunk be part of multiple runtimes? So in this case, for example, let's say if I were from A.js to import B as a chunk, can chunk 1 be part of multiple runtimes? Well, the short answer is yes. And at this point I don't know what the implications of this are, but I hope that one day I will be able to address them in future videos. So that was it for now, and thank you for watching.